Good evening. I'm Haley Mungia, a reporter with the Long Beach Press Telegram, representing the Press Telegram, the Grunion Gazette, and all of my colleagues across the Southern California News Group. And I'm Jason Ruiz, reporter with the Long Beach Post and the Long Beach Business Journal. We're proud to be partnering with the other Long Beach publications to sponsor these political forums during this very significant election season. In just a moment, we'll start our debate between the candidates for the Long Beach City Council 6th District seat. But first, we're going to go over the ground rules for this evening. The event is streaming live online across the websites and social media channels of our respective publications. But you will also be able to watch rebroadcasts online afterward. Candidates understand their microphones and cameras are on continuously throughout this broadcast. Both candidates will be asked to provide an opening statement before we jump into our questions, which come from our reporters and editors and from voters in the community. Candidates will have 2 minutes to answer the questions each, and if there is a request for rebuttal or a moderator follow-up, that is 1 minute. We'll alternate who goes first between the two candidates. We flipped a coin to decide who goes first. Questions are known only to the two of us and have not been shared with candidates or the campaigns in advance. Each candidate will be allowed 2 minutes to respond to each question. Again, if candidates request I'm reading the same thing again. Yeah, so we'll just skip past me reading that second part twice. With that, we'd like to introduce you and welcome our candidates from District 6, Saro and D. Andrews. Suli, you have to go first.
Sure, thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. Thank you to the Long Beach Media Collaborative for hosting this evening's debate. My name is Dr. Suli Saro, and I'm running to put people first and use my experience and knowledge to make District 6 better. I'm a mom of two, a professor at Cal State LA for teaching community organizing in the School of Social Work, and I work for the Rivers Mountains Conservancy as well. I've lived in Long Beach for about 10 years. I'm a former labor organizer, executive director of an organization serving youth in the 6th District, a former health policy advocate, and city commissioner. Throughout my campaign in the past year and a half, I've been speaking with voters and creating a people's plan for the 6th District. And I won't be able to share everything in detail, but what I have heard is that they want a council member who responds to email, phone calls, show up for work, and get things done. Affordable housing, reducing homelessness, economic development opportunities, public safety, violence prevention, and thank you. And I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Suli. Next, Dee.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Vice Mayor D. Andrews, and I have the privilege of serving you for the last 3.5 terms. And I live in the 6th District for over 75 years. I'm here because I believe that the work we have started in the 6th District is not finished, and I would be humble to earn the community support for my last term. I keep hearing that we are, worse off than we were 10 years ago. Let me be clarifying some of the facts. Since being in office, we have created more green space in the community than is needed, and we have brought in a new playground and amenities and the new existing parks. We have demolished the nuisance and crime activities, property, such as 3 liquor stores, diving bars, and the predator lending business on Barnett and Long Beach Boulevard. And instead, we have created additional affordable housing units, and more than any other district, we have also brought in a complete new Mark Twain library, which you know of. We have transformed Hamilton Bowl into Chittick Field, and we have secured a children's clinic and affordable senior housing to come to Anaheim and Walnut.
Thank you.
That we have worked and done. So unless you...
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. So with that, we'll get into the questions. First, we're going to ask a few questions about the issue on everyone's mind right now, the coronavirus. So this one is for both of you. The 6th District has had some of the highest rates of coronavirus cases in the city. So the question is, why do you think that is? And how do you think Long Beach could address the issues that contribute to the virus's transmission in District 6? And we'll allow Dee to go first.
Thank you very much. As the civic uprising and the coronavirus happened, I've been on the forefront talking to small businesses, providing grants and loan information, turning them into care dollars. I have even pushed for resources to come to our community in front of a pop-up and door hangers. So it's a thing that when we talk about this, and this we know that this is one of the situations, it's not just locally, this is international. And it's all about education. Education, we must have that in order to be able to get together and work with the things that we need to get tested. And we need these individuals Let the children work with us and work with us in a way that we can help any and everyone that's out in this dangerous situation, what we call COVID-19. So we need it, and we were going to work with it in order to get it done. Thank you.
Right, but we're 7 months into this pandemic, Mr. Andrews, and the 6th district continues to have these problems. So what is your plan going forward?
You know, it just like we were talking about in the 7 months. You know, most of us, when we know about this, because we know businesses closing, we know people are trying to get back into their jobs. So what I think is that we need to do a follow-up, you know, for us, you know, health order. We need to stay at home, you know, because of the fact that we don't follow these rules, we'll never get back to where we should be. But in the process of doing this, if we follow the rules, follow what science and doctors are saying, we can at least get down to back to some form of normalcy. You know, I think some of the educational programs that they put out there, if we follow those, I know we're going to be able to serve the programs that serve Black and Latino communities, because we're the ones that's supposed to be the hardest hit. So if we follow those, I think that we're going to be able to get back to some form of normalcy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Suli, your response, do you need us to say the question?
Yeah, well, no, yeah, that would be great to hear. I know that it's why it's the highest COVID rate, but I also want to hear if you could share the rest of the question.
Yeah, so why do you think it has some of the highest rates in the city, and how do you think Long Beach could address the issues that contribute to the virus's transmission in District 6?
Sure. Well, you know, District 6, 90813 has the highest poverty rate. And generally that's correlated with why the COVID rates are highest, because we have so many essential workers who don't have the option to stay home and work. And oftentimes the essential worker are living at home where there are multiple family members living in the same space. So it's really hard to prevent the infection if you don't have a spare room or an extra space to quarantine yourself. And I really think that we need, in addition to Project Room Key, we need a program for essential workers who gets infected and want to actually go to a room or a space, perhaps a hotel room, to quarantine themselves and not infect their other family members, because that's probably why the rates are still high. And I think that it's unacceptable that it continues to be this high.
Thank you.
How do you, well, I'll ask a follow-up since we'll be equal here, but
Sure.
How would you propose paying for that kind of a program where somebody who was sick would then get to maybe go stay somewhere so they wouldn't have to potentially infect their family members at home?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's the same way we got Project Room Key funding is from the county. In addition to advocating at a state level, working probably with my state assembly member and state senator to advocate for emergency COVID fund that's allocated to essential worker, and doing public, private, and even labor funding and matching funds to get rooms for essential workers. So there's ways that we can advocate and negotiate and fight for working families who's keeping our economy going. And it's unacceptable that we haven't done anything at this point. And that's something that I want to get to work immediately on.
Okay, we're going to stick the first few questions are going to be on coronavirus. The next question is, so members of the board of the Long Beach Department of Health and Human Services have recommended that the city enforce the mask mandate with fines. Would you support this move? Why or why not? And we started with the councilman first, so let's start with yourself on this one.
So when we're talking about fine, it's talking about punishment. And I think that it means that we have to increase enforcement, and who's going to do that enforcement? I think that we really need to go back to the basics about how do we continue to do community building, mutual aid in our neighborhoods to encourage people to think about how it's beyond themselves that they need to think about, and that we need to protect each other. And it's oftentimes those who are closest to us that we most trust and listen to. And perhaps we need to bring healthcare workers in the neighborhood to talk to people rather than saying, hey, you're not wearing a mask, so we're gonna fine you. I don't think more enforcement works.
Okay, Dee, do you need me to restate the question?
Yeah, no, I definitely understand it. And I hear what you're saying, because before we start fighting, especially in a district of my situation, we need to continue to educate folks, because that's the key to all of it. We need to be able to provide, protection equipment. We have to, we have seen that when we talk about enforcement, the folks in lower income communities are, are the ones that are find the most. So we need to let everyone know nobody is immune and anybody can get COVID. So first, let's say it's with the seniors, but now it's with our kids. So this is why I'm not in any way of shape or form talking about finding anyone. I just think education would be the key to all of this situation, because education, and that's when people will get a chance to learn. And this is where we kind of miss out in our just because the fact that we're missing that, we're losing that because of the fact that this is something that doesn't have any presence in it. It doesn't care seniors, middle class, or children, and it's very frightening. So I think our seniors now and our children are getting, very frightened about this. And so I continue to work as hard as I can to try to educate anyone I come in contact with, even our homeless individuals. They need to be known and educated about it, because as long as they're out there, they are always vulnerable to be a part of it. So thank you.
Thank you. And as a follow-up to both of you, do you support businesses being fined for failing to comply with health orders?
Yeah, because the businesses have been educated. They have signs up. Oftentimes you'll see businesses who are not following the rules that have the signs up in the building. So I think that's past the point of education. So we'll start with Dee on the rebuttal, or not the follow-up.
You have to understand that I think everyone knows that business is about trying to make money. And I know a lot of them has kind of went a little overboard and not following rules, but it has to still go back to, even though we talk about educating businesses, their whole thing is about when are we going to start and find a way to make money. So before we start finding businesses and districts, do not always, have the material in their, native language. So that's another thing. You can tell someone something, but it's not in their language. They're just going to start. I've been getting calls from all different, ethnicities asking, when are we going to start? When are we going to start? So I'm saying, why would you ask me that if it's already been publicized on the news? It's on the newspapers. We have it on the radio. We have it on TV. So, but we need that native language in order to let these individuals know we're going to have to do something about educating everyone about this COVID-19. And so I'm really finding education before finding, and that is going to be the key to all of it, you guys. Business or non-business, education before finding.
Suli?
So I think that at certain levels, there are increasing level of education and then certain level of penalty. And I think finding is the last resort, just because small businesses are really getting by at the margin, really trying to get by as much as they can. But I think that it does have to escalate to a point of some level of penalty. And I think not necessarily a fine, but it could be community service hours to ensuring that we're doing alternative activity to promote building our community rather than taking something away from the community.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So on the topic of businesses, one other aspect that's gotten a lot of attention during the pandemic has been the conditions of workers, particularly essential workers and those who are in industries that have been impacted by the coronavirus. So the City Council has tried to address some of those issues by passing ordinances to address worker recall, worker retention, and paid supplemental sick leave in certain industries. So do you think those ordinances have been sufficient to address the problems that these workers face? And if not, how would you build on them? And we'll start with Suli.
Sorry, can you just repeat the question one more time? Because you kind of
Sure.
said them really fast.
So the City Council has passed some ordinances to try to help workers amid the pandemic that address worker recall, worker retention, and paid sick leave. So do you think those have been sufficient to address the issues that workers have been facing? And if not, how would you build on them?
Well, I think that as far as how do we continue to support and retain workers, I think that it also includes having conversations with the employers as well, right? And I think getting to the table and figuring out what's not working and what's working, because we're in an unprecedented time where what we've been doing in the past hasn't been working. So I think that we got to look for alternative collaboratively with everybody.
Okay, and Dee?
I support the recall, retention and sick leave. But I think we can all do better, because we need to work with our businesses, labor groups, and all, interest stakeholders. I do think that when you talk about this, no one really knew that this was going to come about, but since it's here, if we, again, I do not think businesses, purposely, put work in harm's way. Because business wants, make money, but also they want to have their, I think, their workers, very successful. They want to be in a safe place. So I think that this is where we have to really understand that we know that this is not going to last forever, but in the process of, we don't want to continue to have people, killed, or knowing that they have come in contact with this, and that's where all the fear comes about. So I think we continue to have to work with each other, and knowing that we're there for you, we're going to help you and make sure that our businesses can get back to normalcy, where we can get these people back to work, because right now we're in dire need. Thank you very much.
Do you have a specific example? Like, let's say on Tuesday, you were going to agendize something that would help essential workers further than what the city has already done. Do you have an idea, a policy that could help them be at work and be safer?
Well, that's again, I think, just what we talked about. Of course, we want to talk to, essential workers and labor groups, because the fact that no one wants to go back to work if you feel like you're in harm's way. But I think that this is where, again, we talked about, educating the individual, letting them know that we're not going to put your lives in any form of danger and trying to open up a business and make money and lose lives. This is not the way our city runs, and this is not the way our city will run. So this is why I think it's very important that we continue to make sure that we educate our people and let them know we are there for you. And when we get through this, we will get these people back to work and get our city back to where it should be.
Suli, any ideas?
As far as further protections for workers, essential workers?
Yeah, past what the city has already done.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that we have to consider, again, what are the needs of the workers, as far as what is it that they're continuing to have challenges with that's been a barrier for them to have a better quality of life. So is it supplemental for housing, right? So I think that maybe my questions are vague because I'm not very clear on, the specific ordinance you're talking. I mean, you're talking in general, right, about what additional would we add. I've shared earlier about how I would do, quarantine housing that would be available to workers should they need it, was an example earlier. So maybe that's why I'm not able to think about another one, because that one's at the forefront of my mind.
Okay, that's fair. Okay, we've spent enough time. I mean, we spent as a community 7 months on the coronavirus, so we're going to shift gears here in the debate to something else.
As I said, right there, we talk about, since she's not on the council, but, for the record, we've already done a quarantine housing with the first, responders, at our local hotels. So, that's the advantage that I have, but that's what we've already done. A quarantine housing, with the first response.
Right, but with all due respect, she's saying that if workers get sick, that they would have housing provided to them, so they wouldn't have to live at home and infect their family members.
Yes,
is different.
So maybe pre-answered that question. That's why I'm like, I don't know what else to add.
Oh yeah, you're fine.
That's important to me right now.
All right, so let's move on. So now we're going to talk about the economy more broadly. So the city just finished a budget cycle with a $30 million deficit and faces future years with the same kind of shortages. So what areas of the budget, if any, have you identified as areas where cuts could occur in order to preserve critical services? So we'll start with Dee on this one.
Okay. I think ever since I've been on the council, I've worked, with my colleagues. So we passed a fair, balanced budget. But, I was on the council when, we went into 2009 recession, and we're going to get through this COVID, recession as well as no one, would like cuts. No one likes cuts, but you guys know what's coming down this pipe. My priority, and I've always been to ensure that our critical services such as, public safety, trash collection, senior citizen services, to remain, functional and operating at least 100%. Right now the focus is not, it's not to be kept, just basically my focus is to be keeping on people and getting in their homes and keeping small businesses open. That is my main focus, and those are at my forefront. And it's all about, again, when we even start that, we find a way to defer and suspend these fees for small businesses and start the work on, on these things. We can get this COVID out of the way, get these small business and that deficit that we're up under. I tell you, we are going to be able to get back to where we should be. It's just going to have to get over the main thing first, and that's the COVID. I know we're trying to
stay. All right.
Okay, excuse me.
Same question to Suli.
Okay, so the question is, where would you cut from the city budget in order to make up for the $30 million deficit?
Right. Whoever wins this election is going to have a say in next year's budget, and next year's budget is going to have a deficit likely. So where are you willing? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to clarify that I heard the question correctly. Thank you.
Yep.
I would certainly want to look back into what we have been talking about a lot is, can we consider shifting more funding from public safety? And I think that we have to really look at the condition of our society and community right now. As I shared earlier, I'm not big on enforcement as much as it's necessary. It cannot be the only answer for behaviors, because social behaviors and what leads us to various challenges that we face, especially during COVID, has to be about investing in building people, preparing people for workforce development opportunities, to providing, social services assistance, and really importantly, how are we able to have healthy relationships with each other through healthy mediation and conflict resolution, right? So I see that as a prevention end that helps public safety not have to do as much on the enforcement end.
Would you, as a council person, consider or advocate for delaying or scaling back or even canceling planned infrastructure projects? Like, for instance, we have a number of projects set for the Olympics in order to make sure that the priorities that the city has today are met. And we'll start again with Suli.
Sure, if it's legally possible, right? Because certain measures, like Measure A, they're designated for certain spending in addition to Measure, I think it's H or HH. I mix up the H's, but they're designated for homeless services. So I would certainly want to look at some of these, while homeless services isn't infrastructure, but I would want to consider looking at it. But I think that we want to also make sure on the legal end if that's possible.
Dee, would you consider doing any of that to make sure that, like the necessities are met now, and possibly putting off some projects like the Olympics or the pool?
Being on the council, something I have, I think no one likes cuts, and it's a hard job, but cutting services mean cutting employing positions as well. And we have balanced the budget, on the council over the years. And someone always does not end up, happy. And you can see that as we speak now. It requires a close look at all the services. And we can always take a look at big projects and see where we can relocate priorities. But this is something that I think that makes any and all of the services in the city of Long Beach a little on edge, because the fact that we're talking about going into a $30 million deficit, there's going to be a lot of, furloughs, cuts, and things that people are not going to like. And I think it's going to be kind of sad, because people do want to get back to work. And it's going to be tough, but I hope we can get at least some form of, normalcy when we finish, dealing with these first parties that we're going to have to deal with for the next coming year.
All right, thank you. So next, do you believe that allowing restaurants to use public parking spots, like with the parklets and open streets program, is appropriate given the current circumstances? And if so, do you think it should continue past the pandemic? We'll start with Dee.
Would you please repeat that? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Do you believe that the parklets and the open streets program in the city right now are an appropriate way to help businesses? And if so, do you think it should continue past the pandemic?
If it's like I said, if it's succeeding in what they're doing, because, first of all, I want to say yes, because actually in my community, people want more parklets. They need just to make sure that it is, balanced. And that's what I would really like to see. I just don't want to see like we have 1 or 2 in the 6th district, like go downtown and see 12, 13, or 14. And so far, the least ones that we have, they're still working, because it's giving people a chance to really get some form of works and people a chance to come out and do things, because it's outside. And we know that that's one thing that the COVID has caused us to do, is stay in. But now we're getting a chance to come out. I've walked my business corridor, and we have many applications being, applying for, because this is what they would really like to do. Maybe this should have been done way before this, but I am totally in agreement of that.
So do you think the program should be made permanent past the pandemic?
I would love, if this is going to be a success, and from the looks of it, this is being very successful, I'd love to see something like this become a permanent situation, because in many ways it slows traffic down. It does a lot of good things. You know, most people, you can't go flying up and down the streets. You can, but it wouldn't be really feasible. But I think right now, this is something that we came up with, and it's a good idea, and I would be in total agreement with it, because we have made sure that the residents want them before we even try to do any of it. And we have a lot of applications saying people definitely want to have these parkers. So I'm really looking for to have more in the 6th district.
All right, thank you. And Suli?
So yes, I think that we certainly could use more parklets in the 6th district, but I think that this is a program I think seems to be successful for where it is. But I do think that we need to consider how it's impacting parking. And I think that also helps. But I think the bright side about it is it helps increase neighborhood activities and having people outside and communicating and hanging out with each other. I think that maybe we need to consider the feasibility of looking into having it become long-term for just if COVID continues to exist. It really depends on COVID. But it also depends on how can we use this as an opportunity to activate corridors and neighborhoods. And so that's where I would like to consider how it could be more long-term is in that effect.
Okay. This will be the final question on economy, and it's actually kind of timely because on Tuesday, the City Council is going to be hearing an update on the city's project labor agreement. So with the project labor agreement that was passed in 2015, it was supposed to ensure that Long Beach workers got to work on City of Long Beach jobs, like the airport remodeling that may or may not be happening right now. But there have been a lot of criticisms of this because it allows for local hire to count as people from LA County or Orange County. And that would meet, it would check the box for local hire for this program. So as this new PLA is being explored and approved, would you advocate for a stricter definition of local hire to be included so that more Long Beach workers are put on Long Beach jobs? And this one will be for Suli first.
Absolutely, because I think that we also need to better track when we are hiring locally, because right now I haven't been able to locate specifically where we're hiring even within certain district. And I know that the 6th district has the highest poverty rate, so highest unemployment rate. So I want to know if we're hitting the community members that need these workforce development training and opportunities to transition into these jobs. And that's the whole idea of why we have these agreement, is to making sure that they're serving the community that these projects and developments are in. So absolutely, I will.
Okay, Dee.
As long as I've been a council person, I've always supported PLA, and I've always been my cry that we hire people from the community, people who had records and people who just overall needed a second chance. And we've hired a new PLA coordinator for this same reason. And we need to make sure that it is not just a plan, but something that's being enforced. And this is why I'm so ready for something this type, because I've been here so long, and most of the time I hear what these very big projects coming up, and very few people that we have in the city of Long Beach are working on it. And that to me is a little unacceptable. So I will work and continue to work as hard as I can to see that if you live here, you should be able to work here. Thank you.
So if you're reelected, you would pledge to try to fix that? To try to ensure, as the language for the new PLA is constructed, that it says maybe Orange County hires don't count as local hire?
Who are you speaking to?
For D.
Okay, and one more time, please, sir.
So I'm saying if you're reelected, you're saying that you support it, but I'm saying if you're reelected, you have the ability to have an influence over the language of the new PLA. So are you pledging tonight that you will work to ensure that more Long Beach workers get to have an opportunity to work on these projects?
You mean, that by all means, that would be a yes, because the fact that I think people have to understand, if you look at the district in which I live in, I always talk about jobs. Like I said, jobs can stop a bullet. And if we don't have jobs, that gives you more idle time. And this is all I'm asking for the individuals who've had records or with this second chance. This would be the greatest opportunity in the world for them, because you notice we do have a very high crime rate. And like I said, all of it is not just in the 6th district, but any individual who's had, some problems with, their past, they should have a second chance to be able to go out and make a life for themselves. And this is why I will really constantly come up with every chance I get to be able to help that situation.
All right, thank you. So now we will be moving on to questions about police reform, which is a big issue for a lot of voters in the 6th district. So the first question is specifically for Dee. So your campaign has sent out text messages citing you're fighting for police reforms. So what specifically have you done to help reform the LBPD?
And like we say, this is a subject that I think anybody, especially at this time, is speaking about. Being a Black man in the 6th district for over 70 years, this has been a pride of mine, of our community for the years. And it says, do we call for police or do we not? People can sympathize, but unless you have lived through the beginning in the red light district, being limited to cross certain streets and going to certain places after certain hours, being a victim of injustice, you can't really understand. We need to have, to me, and this is the way I'm speaking, I think we need to have a full audit of our police department budget, and I am willing to agendize this request. We need to make sure that our police department is only protected and serving. Over the years, our police department has become a social worker, our homeless outreach officers, and much more. And I've been, supportive of the, a hoopla model where we deploy social workers and mental health professionals instead of police officers when deemed appropriate. And I'm willing to support a model like that, but we also need to reform. Let's look it up. And I think right now, it's time for us to look at our Citizen Police Complaint Commission. It is hard. It's really hard even to find a police officer guilty of the wrongdoing. And my opponent serves on that commission as a chair and never stood up, spoke up on any of these injustices. And I would like to see more people of color on the commission. And I would also like to find a complete and independent oversight. At least one commission should have been, arrested or served jail time, because at least they will have, a perspective in what is going on as our commissioners.
We'll get to that later on in this section, but the question was about the text messages that your campaign is sending out saying that you specifically have fought for police reforms. And to date, the only reforms that have been instituted at the LBPD have been done by the department itself or have been handed down by the state. So we were just curious what you have done, since you're sending out the text saying that you have done things.
And like I said, this is what we talk about, trying to work with these individuals, but no one seems to think that our police need to not be social workers. Our police, they talk for protect and serve, and that's where we need to have a board or someone to come together. We sit at the table and we speak on this, not just sending them out to situations where you say, well, if you have an individual with those messy things, we need social workers there. We need individuals to come out and give a whole overlook of it instead of just saying, well, you go out and do it as a policeman. We need to come together as a family, and maybe we can get at the table and maybe reconcile some of these situations. No one is talking. And if you guys seeing what's going on now, we got the attention of this whole situation where people are listening to our young generation saying, look, we want you guys to listen to us, not to you. And by this, now that we have your attention, let's come to the table and try to get something done. Let's not keep protesting and doing the things that we feel like is not right. Let's come together and sit down and talk about these. And I know we can get things done. If you talk about it, you can hear about it.
Seeley, where would you like to respond to the claim first, or do you want to answer the question? I'll leave that up to you. We'll do both.
Well, I was even wondering if the dean knows who his 6th District CPCC commissioner is. And I don't know if he's going to answer or.
No, I just answered. I know him very well.
Well, okay. So do you want to? I mean, he invoked you in that exchange where he made an allegation that you didn't do anything as your time on as the chair of the CPCC. You can choose not to respond to that if you don't want to.
Well, I think that I asked that question to make sure he knows what's even happening in the CPCC commission, because as you should probably know, is as a CPC commissioner, you review complaints and you make a recommendation, and it's based on a majority of the 11 members, and that recommendation goes to city manager. City manager makes the decision of whether or not it's sustained or it is thrown out. And so I feel that I have attended, my attendance has been pretty much, I attended as many meetings as I could before I went to maternity leave. And then I came back even while I was on it. So I was present, I was the chair for a year. And I actually resigned when I announced that I was running, because I didn't want there to be any perception of conflict of interest with me being in that position.
So well, if you don't mind, we'll transition. We had a question for you about that time on the CPCC. While you were the chair, you were interviewed by the Long Beach Post, yeah. and you told that reporter that you thought that the work of the commission was important, otherwise you wouldn't be on it. Yeah. And I was curious, do you feel the same way now that everybody is not everybody, but a lot of people are calling for reform for the commission? The council is currently looking at putting it on as a charter amendment. What are your feelings about the commission, and maybe how would you change it?
You know, the commission was created in a response to a situation in where people did not feel there was accountability to the police. And I feel like we actually have one of the better models. While we don't have a lot of teeth, at least there is a process for residents or even anyone that actually comes to the city of Long Beach that has a complaint about the police. So I joined it because I felt that I wanted to do something about police accountability directly. But I found once I'm on it that there is certainly barriers in, I think, limits in what we're able to do as a commissioner. So I'm really happy to see that the budget is allocating $150,000 to ensure that it's being reviewed, and that it'll certainly still have to go through a charter amendment. But that's why I'm so glad to see 6th District Resident John Matthews on the 6th District, representing the 6th District on the CPCC, because he has a legal background that can provide perspective from that round, and also as a Black man. So I think that we can build on what we have. I don't think that we need to completely erase systems we've set up. We can always just make them better.
Okay, Dee, just to follow, I know that was tailored more for Suli since she was the chair, but you had mentioned independent oversight. Yeah. Are you saying that, you know, when whatever comes out of this charter amendment, that you will fight for the commission to, like Suli said, have more teeth? Because right now the city manager ultimately decides if the allegations are upheld, regardless if the commission thinks the officer was in the wrong. The city manager can say no.
You know, then why would we have a police commission if they're not there to raise questions and see things as an unjust? You know, we need to hold everyone accountable when there's an unjust part about. You know, I said that because of the fact that they had to write an whole order, because before anything was even said about some of the things with the police commission that we have. You know, those are departments I think is very, very essential, especially about the district that I live in, because that's where most of they say the problems are. So let's have, a commission that, a commission that would be able to let these individuals be held accountable if there's wrong. And we know they are wrong in every situation. So I would need someone to speak up on those. You know, we know that you're not going to be able to do the part of, in other words, you can't sit up and be the one that's going to be penalizing these individuals, but at least we can say something about it to let the individuals know that the community is not satisfied. They're not happy. So that's why I want to let you know, when we have these commissions, let's make them, be accountable for the job that they accepted to take.
But as the city council person, you have the biggest voice for your district, and you get a chance to write.
Yes, but we'll want information from those commissions. We don't sit there and listen to all the complaints that they bring about on the police. But after it comes in, and then we get it. But if we don't get any, then where are the complaints that we're going to talk about? You have to have complaints in order to talk about a complaint.
Right. Well, a suggestion has been that they should go before the city council, all of the complaints. So would you be open to that?
Well, why should that? Then we're going to eliminate the police commission. I mean, if that's the way you want to do it, that's okay. You know, that's
not the way I want to do it.
In that position, but why would we have that commission if we don't have anyone there who's going to be accountable to make sure that they be held accountable?
So if I may share that we as a commission are always open to give report. And I believe that we actually have reports that are made regularly. The executive director is always happy to brief the council member should they need a briefing, but there is confidential information in every case. So we can, even when we're doing a report back, we never state the complainant's name or even the officer's name. So everything is confidential, and it is certainly shared publicly. I mean, after every meeting, we stay for many hours to discuss each case carefully to come to a consensus, and we report it out. So should you ever need any report, I'm sure the executive director is happy to brief you.
So now's probably a good time to switch to a less divisive topic like the funding for the police department. Haley has a question for you guys.
Yeah, so this is a question for both of you. Would you take funding away from the police department in the next budget cycle to redistribute it to community programs and alternate forms of public safety? And we'll allow Dee to go first.
You know, taking funding away, I think, like I said, I think I would like to be able to do an audit, you know, in all these departments and see where a lot of our money can be spent, maybe in a better way or less better way. But right now, I think an audit would be best for anything, because what we're looking at, the $30 million deficit, money's gonna have to be taken from somewhere. And what do we spend most of our money on? Public safety. So if that has to be a need that we must, you know, get involved in, so let's look at it. You know, you will ever hear me talk about defunding anything, because I do believe, you know, in public safety. But I think we need to ensure that our community has the resources. And the department definitely need that. So right now, for us being able to take money from certain situations where I think it's a very, very important need, but if it's something that we can go into it and we can continue to keep our community safe, then it doesn't bother me at all to be able to take from any, you know, social service groups that we have, if it's going to keep our community safe. But if it's not, then we better try to take another deeper look at something else where we can get our budget, you know, where we can balance our budget.
All right, thank you. And Suli?
I think that I shared that earlier, so I'll have a little bit more time to elaborate on how I do think we need to consider shifting it, because we really need to reevaluate the system of our public safety right now, given the uprising that's happened because of the murder of Mr. George Floyd. And I think that we cannot always, at this point anymore, take solving problems through an enforcement end. We really need to work and step back and think about how we're solving social problems that actually work. It hasn't been working when we've been doing it this way for many years. And then the response is to increase more funding because more enforcement is needed. But really I think I would want to question what are the social issues that police officers are being asked to respond to? Can we consider getting a wide variety of social workers, psychologists, trauma-informed specialists that can be the first responder when there is a dispute, that can respond to the caller so that they know what to do and how to help? And this helps promote building community so that and empower residents who are making these calls about what they can do if it's a neighbor or a family member. Because oftentimes when it gets to a point of enforcement, that's when we have really sad situation that can occur and that can be prevented as well.
All right, thank you. And so now we're going to switch gears again. This question, again, for both of you is about housing. So the state's eviction ban currently lasts through February 1st. So what do you think the city can do to prevent mass evictions of renters at that point? And we'll start with Suli.
So I think that we have to really look back into, as much as people don't like the word rent control, it's really, we have to look at something else that's an alternative, right? There's been rent control, rent stabilization, and now we've got to think about rent sustainability. That we can't think about responding to current problems around the eviction as, well, we have to only have a government response. I think that we have to look at thinking about how can we have and that becomes a housing issue, right? About the cost of housing and why people are being evicted. Are we thinking about, are they even working? Families are working. So if we're looking right at the ordinance around extending, the timeline around eviction, yes, we can look into extending that, but it's not sustainable. I'm sure that's the short-term solution, but I want to look into long-term about how are we addressing the housing crisis, and also looking into whether or not we're increasing incomes as well. Certainly, that's a challenge during the COVID period, but we got to think about all of these factors that's contributing to this problem right now, right?
All right, thank you. And Dee?
Yes, I think it probably takes a conversation with tenants and landlords, because we need to ensure that we are able to keep people in their homes, but also assist. We have to have assistant owners pay their mortgage, because without that, who's going to be able to take any part of the responsibility? We need to ensure that we have an office that helps tenants, landlords come up with this agreement, because we just can't come out and just start throwing people in the streets. If you think homeless is bad now, you wait till after the first of the year, when all of a sudden the government is saying no more freezes, on rent. So we're gonna have to come up with something real fast. That's right around the corner. So you guys, I'm just hoping and praying that somehow, some way, we can find a way to keep these people in their places where they're staying now. And I know the government's gonna have to play an immense part in helping us do that, because I know the mortgage people, they want their money, the renters want to be able to stay in their places, and it's just going to become a form of chaos if we don't get something done and done well. So I know that we're working on things, especially in the city council. I know our mayor is doing everything he can, and our city governors, they're doing the same thing, because we cannot afford to have our people out in the streets like we have now. This is just a small part of what you will see if we don't be able to come up with something, and I don't have the answer to it, because if I did, I wouldn't be here talking to you. I'd be in the world. Thank you.
Dee, there's a community question. This was submitted from one of your constituents, and this could apply to both of you, because either one of you could be representing the 6th district next year. The community has expressed for you, they want you to support an anti-landlord harassment ordinance, because there have been reports, not only from the 6th, but citywide, where even though there is this moratorium on evictions, landlords are still trying to hand 30-day notices, 60-day notices for people to move out in the middle of a pandemic. And there have been allegations that there's been misinformation about the current policies that are in place to protect these people. You brought up the point that you represent a district where people don't always speak English. And maybe this information is not getting across to them. Will you support an anti-harassment ordinance in the future? If it comes up to the city council, could your constituents count on you to vote for that?
Yes. This is really, really unacceptable to me, because I want you to just here in the last few days, on Orange Avenue, a landlord took the doors down and the lamps. The residents came to my house and asked to sign, and just to ask to sign on to this policy, and someone did not turn it in, at the clerks. And I'm willing to agendize this item, because of the fact that people right now, is individuals that stayed in this complex for over 20 years, and they wanted to raise the rent so they couldn't get them out the way they wanted to. So they harassed them by taking down the doors and the lamps, because they have kids there. What if that would have happened and there's kids that fell down those stairs? Because it's a 2-story building. It's just sad to think that the individual will have to harass people about, staying in their place because they can't get their money right now. It has to be a better way, and we're going to work on that to make sure that we do get these people a way out of this, because it's been tough. But I'm telling you, we will get through it.
Suli, do you want to answer that question as the possible leader of the 6th district in the next few months?
Absolutely. I think that I'm happy to work on it with the advocates. I want to explore how we can even maybe make it better and more consistent and expanded to addressing slumlords that exist in this district that continues to exploit tenants. So I want to make sure that we're not just thinking short term about current eviction issues, but thinking longer terms about landlords who have been actually taking advantage of their tenants prior to this COVID pandemic, and more so because they're isolated and less able to communicate with friends and family that could probably provide information on how they could protect themselves.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
Thank you. So now we're going to move on to a couple of questions that we have about climate change and the environment. So in the 6th district, there are a number of issues with pollution, including a high number of hazardous material sites. So if elected, how would you mitigate the impact of environmental pollution on the district's residents? And we'll start with Suli.
So let's break down environmental pollution. And we're talking about air pollution. We're right by the port, and the 6th district borders the 7th, where we have the 710 corridor, and that is deemed as one of the highest polluted area in the city. So I really want to make sure we're going back to AQMD, to thinking about how do we continue to hold the reports that are made accountable from residents such as myself. I oftentimes smell strange things reported and am told that, oh, there's nothing, numerous times. And that makes me wonder, am I making it up? And the other residents may think so too. So when I've spoken with them, we've had the same issue. So for me, it's being engaged and active in the South Coast Air Quality Management District. Sorry, I use acronyms. And to ensure that once even the Councilmember Richardson gets on the board, that I would work with him collaboratively on addressing the air pollution or air quality issue.
Dee?
Yes, I do. It is all about education when we come to this, because I want to make sure that any project that comes in, it should be eco-friendly. And we need to work with our air quality agencies and other agencies to ensure that we address climate change. If we can get briefings, community meetings, and education, we could be a better situation, because a lot of individuals just don't know. I'm over there, I work at a school right next to the oil refineries there, and I tell you, this is going to be a disaster in the later years for those individuals who are working there and the kids who go through there. It could be devastating, Coach. So we're going to have to work our way and, like I say, educate the individuals and let them know what we're up against, and work with some of these agencies that will come in and help us out on this, because I know they're willing, but I just hope we can get this done before anything, drastic happens. Thank you.
Okay. So as development continues and this ripple effect from downtown with these luxury developments continues to extend out, as the leader of the 6th district, how would you balance increasing the city's housing stock, which is a great need anywhere in the city, but also not displacing the current residents? And I forgot who went first last time. So,
I did on the environmental pollution. So it's Dee.
Dee, how would you balance that if you're reelected and not gentrify the area and have a bunch of your current residents be forced out?
Thank you for that question. I support housing and density, where it makes sense. It needs to be, along, our transit-oriented corridors. We need to respect our single family homes, because the fact that they worked hard to get to where they are. And, you would see what we're doing downtown. We're building like no tomorrow, 15, 20-story, situations. But here where we are, we have built, the most affordable I have in my district since I've been there. I've built the most affordable housing, that in any other district. And I want to continue to do that, because my biggest goal right now is trying to keep people in the homes, and the ones that's not there, get them into affordable housing. That is what I'm working on, and that is with my affordable housing and with my seniors. So this is one of my biggest, advocate is working with those individuals and making sure that I can get this done with some form of density, and not trying to, make 15, 20-story high buildings, because that's not going to help us, because we'll be limited with parking there. So I'm just hoping we can get people off the streets into places they can feel comfortable and not be harassed by any form of, slumlords. Thank you very much.
What would be your plan, Suli, to strike that balance between increasing housing and also keeping as many people where they, at least in the area,
Sure. So we certainly have a lot of market rate housing being built, and not enough low income to moderate income housing. So I think we need to consider what kind of permits are being permitted to build them. And I think for particularly the central area, while we have more affordable housing built, are people accessing them is another question. And the other is, how do we also ensure that if we're building some level of market housing, that there's certainly applying the inclusionary law that just passed, right? The other is to consider, how do we also empower residents to be able to own, right, buildings and properties in the area? Because oftentimes when you have people from the local area to be able to buy property, is they tend to make sure that they bring in people and take care of them, right? And keep the people in the community. And so I think that we need to provide education on home ownership and property, buying property, so that it's for the community. And so the other is looking at creative ways and access to dwelling housing, right? And seeing, or even how could we incentivize people to rent out their rooms? Many people might have some rooms they could spare, and there could be an incentive through city programs that allows us to do that. So there's so many variety, from building new housing to modifying existing housing to also empowering local residents to be able to buy their property so that they can ensure they're renting to local people and not be pushed out or displaced.
All right, thank you. And I believe we have time for one last question before closing statements. So this one is just about infrastructure, a big issue in the 6th District, the state of streets, sidewalks, alleys, that kind of thing. So if elected, how would you advocate for more funds, including possibly more Measure A funds, to improve infrastructure in the 6th District? And we'll start with Suli.
Okay. So I think that we need to utilize the existing fund before we can consider getting more funding. I think that we probably have money in place and it's just not being spent appropriately to address various infrastructures, such as, you know, not just roads, but street lights, addressing our sidewalks, to just really basic public works drainage issue. So there are things that can be worked at the moment, and it could be more around how do we address that at a lower level before we actually have to go into major improvements, right? And so that's where I would want to look at first and see if there are alternative ways to addressing it before we have to increase funding for it. So that's where I would want to actually, getting into office, look at it immediately, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done in the district. I mean, that's the #1 issue that people share with me while I'm texting and speaking to them on the phone is, can I get my lights fixed? Can I get my alley lights fixed? Can I get the alley cleaned up, right? It's not directly infrastructure, but it is the quality of life issue. So there's a lot of things that can be done that doesn't necessarily cost money either, because we can utilize neighborhood assets that are in place, right? Cleanups and time. So I always hesitate to increase anything unless we look at what we have.
All right, thank you. Andy?
You know, first of all, I think what we need to do is balance our budget, and we need to, like to say, reprioritize our funds for streets, sidewalks, and overgrown trees. You know, under my leadership, we have repaved many, many miles of streets, sidewalks, and Measure A is doing an amazing job. But I do not want to increase taxes, so I want to make sure that we balance our budget, and if we have to, you know, pull funds from other projects, then let's do so. And that's the way I would be dealing with that situation.
Okay, well, that was it for all of our questions. We did promise that each candidate would get to have a closing statement. And since Suli did get to go first with the opening statements, we'll let Dee go first with the closing statements. So you have one minute, please.
Thank you. Thank you again for listening tonight, for being involved, and I'd be honored to have you support me November the 3rd, because I am your community person. You know, I did not just move in. I do not have tens of thousands of dollars of private dollars supporting my election, and I do not have the media and the press doing any coverage of the work I have been doing. I'm here to continue to represent everyone from the Central Long Beach to Ridley. If you talk about equity, I was the one that helped create Cambodia Town. My opponent was nowhere around when that, so let's be clear, in the future, I will be supporting Cambodia community, but it has to be someone from the community that has known and has done work and know about the town. In these times of covert economic downturn, this district needs someone who has been a leader and always has a relationship with the rest of, you know, council and the mayor and the address of most of these, you know, pressing issues we have to know. And I'm thankful that the Long Beach Unified School teachers support me. I have the Long Beach middle class employees supporting me, all three mayors, Garcia, Foster, and Beverly O'Neill.
Thank you. Yeah, that was 1 minute. We can't go through all the endorsements.
Okay.
Thank you. Suli?
Yeah, so I want to thank you again for hosting tonight's debate. And I want to share that my opponent has had over 10 years to address the issues that we've just discussed, and has really finished yet. And he's saying he needs more time. I think time's up. District 6 cannot afford to wait for change or improvement and have 4 more years of neglect. So we need leadership that can think creatively, work collaboratively, and is responsive to needs of the resident. I hope you've seen earlier from my response that I have passion to serve and that I'm knowledgeable and experienced on not just policy, but community engagement and being able to shift from plans to implementation. I'm the best candidate to navigate and respond and stabilize our community right now due to the pandemic crisis and the upcoming recession. My campaign has been driven by people fund. How can somebody who come out of the district and just move in be able to shift and move community to be able to donate and power this campaign to victory in November? So I hope to earn your vote, and I look forward in serving you come after the election. Thank you so much.
That was right on 1 minute. So to all the viewers, I hope there were plenty of 6th district residents watching tonight. Thank you to the candidates, Suli Saro and the incumbent Dee Andrews, for being here and giving us all of your time tonight. Thank you on behalf of the Press Telegram, the Grunion Gazette, the Business Journal, the Long Beach Post. We do have 2 more upcoming debates next week, I believe, with the LBCC and LBUSD races. You'll see Haley again at one of those.
Tomorrow.
And District 8 tomorrow. I'm already forgetting about District 8. But please feel free to tune in for those if you live in those districts or you're just generally interested in local politics. And if you missed them, you can watch them again online. I believe they're on YouTube and all of our individual websites. So for tonight, I'm Jason Ruiz, and
I'm Haley Munguia.
And thanks again for watching.
Thank you.